Health outcomes. Changes due to interventions. To bring positive change, patient experiences and health must both improve. Healthcare costs must be lowered, and clinician and staff burnout has to end. But our problems are big. 133 million Americans have at least one chronic disease. 500,000 people are dying every year from hospital errors, injuries, and infection. The shortage of primary care professionals will be as much as 100,000 in just the next 5 years. Big problems require bigger solutions. Positive change needs acceleration. It needs to happen now. But these are not so easy solutions that many don't want to hear, and even few are willing to talk about. How to lead such a change? How to discover, discuss, and disrupt healthcare to make a difference now? This is VITALS, Visionary Health Leadership in Action.
Welcome to VITALS. It's my pleasure to kick off this year's VITALS with an incredible speaker. I think all of you know that the VITALS series was created at NEOMED to recognize leaders in healthcare whose transformative actions are changing the way we practice and the way we deliver healthcare to individuals and to populations. And VITALS are the tools through which they do it: value, innovation, technology, advocacy, leadership, and service. Those are the tools that great leaders are using. And those are the tools that the leaders coming out of NEOMED are learning to be able to apply to their practices and to the leadership in healthcare. We're really excited today to recognize one of our own, Dr. Frank Papay, who's a graduate of the class of 1984 for what was called NEO-UCOM and is now NEOMED. Dr. Papay is the chairman of the Dermatology and Plastic Surgery Institute at the Cleveland Clinic, and also reports to himself as chairman of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. Many of you may know this name. He's been an incredible leader in healthcare. He's an eminent scholar, researcher, clinician. He received the Cleveland Clinic's renowned Centennial Sones Innovation Award for Lifetime Achievement in Innovation this year. And what you all probably know Dr. Papay for is he led the very first full-face transplant of the youngest transplant recipient in the world in 2015, and also America's first face transplant in 2000 at the Cleveland Clinic. Without further ado, please welcome to the stage Dr. Papay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, it's good to be back. I used to sit in the back row there in biochemistry. And so I'm still a back row type of guy. So it's an honor to be here. It's seeing some old friends and making some new ones. So I'm going to talk about things. First of all, I'm not going to talk about the Krebs cycle or the next new receptor in a tumor. I promise you that. But I'm going to talk about some things that I've learned in life, inside and outside of medical school. And so I'm going to talk about why and how I invent and go from there and see if I can challenge you near the end. Well, I'm a product of the 60s. I grew up outside of Elyria Township, outside of Oberlin, Ohio. And that was in the 50s and 60s, you know, the space race and Sputnik was in. And I was enthralled. And my uncle lived in Milan, Ohio, just down the road from where Thomas Alva Edison was born and grew up. So I used to go and visit him and go in this little museum that was his old house along a little creek. If you ever have a chance, it's absolutely amazing. And I was enthralled about an invention where I was even collecting old-fashioned light bulbs, thinking that would sort of embed something into me. And to this day, I still collect very old antique Thomas Edison's inventions. So then I used to watch in front of the TV back in those days, TV was still black and white, and watch what was called The 20th Century by Walter Cronkite. And that tone of his voice, he used to talk about with this glee, this joy about invention that was going around the United States, especially the space race. So I wanted to be an astronaut, really bad, really bad. And during that time, even when I was in second grade, I was able to see just by serendipity, and you'll see what I'm going to talk about is serendipity in relationships throughout this talk. When I was at St. Agnes grade school, to see Kennedy drive by in a Corvette, standing up in the Corvette, and till this day, I've always wanted a Corvette, because of that. So, the space race happened, and again, I still wanted to be part of that. And here I am there with a little bit of short hair, still playing with, the Legos at that time, which were made out of wood pretty much, and just building things out of wood. And then by serendipity, I became a drummer, percussionist, because I lived outside of Oberlin, Ohio. So music became a big part of my life. And I was taught jazz drumming and things like that. And actually, the guy who was the sort of a student of Lionel Hampton, who was a big jazz drummer, was the guy who taught me. And then, I don't know if you know about drumming, but Buddy Rich used to pick up it was probably one of the most famous and best drummers ever in the history of drumming, was there, and he used to pick up his jazz ensemble from there all the time. So I got to meet Buddy Rich by serendipity, by chance. And then because I was a drummer, I used to play in these bugle corps, and I don't even know if they exist anymore, where I used to drum, and then there's these, baton twirlers would twirl and the flags would flag, and I was back there drumming. And by chance, by serendipity, we were asked, and it was called Linda's Lassies. So I was a lassie. And Linda's Lassie was asked to go to Wapakoneta, Ohio, of which was the birthplace of Neil Armstrong, who happened to be from Ohio and ended up teaching at University of Cincinnati. But it was after he landed to the moon. So I actually got to go there and see Neil Armstrong in person. Oh, boy, you wanted to be an astronaut. And then up there was Bob Hope. And the sum, which is very famous or infamous here, was the governor at that time, Governor Rhodes, who was infamous for sending the troops to Kent State with the Kent State massacre. Serendipity, by chance. Well, then I applied. I ended up getting a master's in bio. I went to Ohio University undergrad, got a degree in zoology and chemistry, went to Case Western Reserve University, got a master's degree in biomedical engineering. And then I applied with this guy who was one of my roommates, who was from West Point, and he was a pilot in the Army. And we both applied to be an astronaut. I still have my rejection letter. Okay. But boy, I wanted to work really bad. So what could I do? So I ended up working as an intern at Lewis Research Center, which is now called Glenn Research Center at NASA, just outside of Cleveland. And I met my boss, who's here in that lower left there, and that's Bruce Banks, who happened to be the #1 inventor, patent holder at Lewis Research Center in NASA, mostly on ion beam applications, ion thrusters, which failed at that time, but are now being used for interstellar space by chance, by luck. And he became like a father figure to me. And then I was asked to sit on here when I was here in medical school, in addition to being an intern and resident at the Cleveland Clinic, to sit on the Invention Hall of Fame with this other guy that I happened to meet by chance. And he was the guy who invented Segway, and he never graduated from undergrad, did all his inventions originally. He was the guy who did the laser light shows. If you've ever been to rocks back in my day, like Led Zeppelin and stuff, like there was all these lasers in the ceiling. That was his original invention that he did in the basement in Long Island for his brother. But again, another guy that his name was Dean Kamen, by the way, that sort of influenced me. So I went to medical school here. Wanted to be a neurosurgeon, a functional surgeon, because I read a book called Brain Control by Delgado. And then I went to, graduated a little bit earlier here and went down to Riverside Methodist outside of Columbus, Ohio. And they stuck me in the NICU for 3 or 4 months. And if you've ever been stuck in the NICU for 3 or 4 months, it's you ever see the movie Clockwork Orange? It's where they reprogram you. Well, they reprogrammed me not to be a neurosurgeon. And so I said, oh, this is not what I thought it would be, functional surgery, So I ended up doing the next best thing, what I thought was craniofacial skull-based surgery. And until this day, I still do, through ENT, then plastics, and then a fellowship in Utah and then back, and actually in Europe a little bit, and came back to the Cleveland Clinic. And by serendipity during that journey, I met Marshall Strom, who was the first person to do a laryngeal transplant at the Cleveland Clinic. And then Andre Sakis, who was actually in Sweden that time, he's Greek, but came to the Cleveland Clinic, was the first to do the uterine transplants here in the United States. And then when I was at Utah, as a fellow, I was studying some of the research with Maria Semenov, who happened to be at Utah by chance. And she was doing this stuff called composite tissue allograft transplantation on rats. And so we were able to attract her. When I came to the Cleveland Clinic, I was able to attract her. And she had this idea about a face transplant. And by serendipity, I became the chairman. And I said, okay, we're ready to go. Let's do it. So years later, I find myself in one of the cases on the cover of, National Geographic and films and stuff like that. And it's not because I'm a stellar student. Trust me, when I was here, I was not the stellar student. I was the oldest of probably of the group of the 6-year program and they were by far a lot smarter than I am still to this day. But again, serendipity. So what have I learned? What life lessons have I learned going through all this over 30, 40 years? I call it the Forrest Gump effect. Okay. And the Forrest Gump, if you watch the movie again and again and again, you'll understand that Forrest Gump wasn't the brightest bulb in the box, right? So the first thing I learned, well, you don't have to be the brightest bulb in the box, and I'm a prime example of that. But what you have to do is get the other bulbs to light up with you, okay? And that's the trick. That's the secret sauce, not just to invention, but to entrepreneurship. And you need invention and entrepreneurship to truly make innovation. So you don't have to be the brightest. You just, by serendipity, you meet these people and you create relationships. And so as I teach my twin boys, it's not about the intellectual capacity that you have. You have to have a plateau of that. But it's really the social intelligence, to me, in my opinion, is much more important than the intellectual intelligence. And again, you can see this in even great comedians like Jerry Seinfeld would say, it's harder for him to talk to one person rather than a crowd of thousands. But again, what did Forrest Gump do? He developed a very sincere, authentic, great relationship with anybody he touched throughout that movie. So one of it is if, at least to me, I sort of absorbed what was around me through these relationships. So what I try to do till this day, I try to surround myself with people much smarter than me, which again is not too difficult, okay? So, and here's just a few examples from guys like the guy in the upper right there. He was my advisor at Case Western Reserve when I was getting a doctorate of management there. And then just by chance, I met these other guys. There's Dean Kamen there, and this other guy, Jaggi Gill, who's running one of my companies. Just by chance, I met him. And it was that relationship that was developed and how we were attracted to what we can do together and things much bigger than us as a single person, as a single ego or superego. The other thing I learned is diversity of thoughts. And I'm going to show you a couple books as we go along the way that in your life you may want to pick up. Just a little advice. One is this woman on the right here. That's Elinor Ostrom, who won a Nobel Prize on this book called Creating the Commons. And what I learned from her book is this process of collecting sort of the egos and superegos and intellectual capacities and social intelligence together, kind of like the Starship Enterprise. You got Spock, you got Doc, you got this and that, but together the Starship is the best. So it's this collective genius that you put together. It's kind of like your own personal boardroom. And you keep on building on that boardroom into a Senate more and more. And that's where you create things that are great ideas that are bigger than you are. So Elinor Ostrom, again, won a Nobel Prize. She passed away a couple of years ago, but I suggest you read that, or the sort of the side books from that. And what does that tell me is also that goes back to the social intelligence and the serendipity of Forrest Gump. The other thing is, as I get older, that I'm not being mentored by people older than me. I'm being mentored by people much younger than me. And it's that excitement, childlike enthusiasm that they have that, again, I want to absorb. It's that new technology that they know much better, new software programs that they know much better that I try to learn from them, like Python, et cetera, artificial intelligence, machine learning, this or that I learned from them. So my mentors are not older than me. They're much, much, much younger than me. And then that, like I said, there's this joy in people that like to invent or innovate in groups and teams, like a team sport. So if any of you played in a team sport or in a musical ensemble or something, you kind of know what I mean. That once you create something together as a group, there's this great joy. And if you look at great inventors or great geniuses, you know, they're childlike, not childish, but childlike. So never lose that childlike joy, amazement, awe in things. And I try to, again, develop relationships with people that have that, because people like people that are like them, right? And on the top, I was able to meet Story Musgrave, who was from Texas. You know, he's a doctor. He was the guy who fixed the Hubble. I had him as a visiting professor a couple of times in some of the national subspecialty shows that we had. But he had this like great way of developing relationships, very simple, very authentic. Again, like Forrest Gump, and was very much in awe as a child, and even now as an adult. The other thing is when you're in a group, and especially if any of you are musicians and you play in an ensemble, you get this thing called flow. And as a group of inventors or somebody who's trying to solve a problem or a management problem or something, I like to do it in groups. So me, I have vice chairmen. Actually, I don't have one vice chairman. I have 4 vice chairmen, because the more the merrier. And it's that group together that we develop this flow. And it's something that is almost like if you ever do ad lib and you kind of bounce things off of anybody and they kind of know what you're going to do before you do, or if you have a drum solo or something, they kind of know that. And it's by working together over a period of time, developing this sort of unspeakable relationship in real time that this flow happens. And it gives me great joy. So what, Dr. Papay? So what, Frank? So how do you do it, you know? So you have to look at the problems. And one of the things that they asked were for Albert Einstein said, if the world was ending in 60 minutes, what would you do? He said, I would spend 59 minutes figuring out and clarifying the problem. And so I always tell my residents, the diagnosis is half the cure. Because once you understand the problem and the clarity of that problem, it's like that you can pick up what to do next. So what are the problems? What are the forces of change that are going on in healthcare right now? Where there's this great uneven healthcare cost against economic disparities, against racial disparities, against age disparities. And look where the cost is going. Most of the cost is going to the upper couple percent, and it's not spread out evenly. And so where do you hunt for innovation? Where the problem is, and clarifying that problem. So one of the things is simply healthcare has to be cheaper, faster, and better, right? Always has to be better. But in addition to that, it has to be cheaper and faster. This was done 10 years ago. This was a TED Talk on the 20 great challenges of medicine. The role of the patient, chronic diseases, making them better and monitoring them, Alzheimer's, dementia, improving better medical communications. That was over 10 years ago. It's the same problems now. Haven't changed in over a decade. So what are we doing wrong? Okay, we're not implementing these things. We're not bringing this flow together, these groups together to solve these great problems. Because our selective incentives, what's good for me is not good for you and vice versa. This ego, this superego gets in our way, all right? And then there's the black swan effect. And COVID is like the perfect example of something happening out of nowhere that changes the face of innovation, that changes the face and drives innovation much, much quicker. For us, it was telemedicine, though it's backing off right now. But you know, there wasn't a lot of new vaccine development before COVID, okay? Not much. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies lost money on COVID. Not on COVID, but on vaccine development. COVID changed that around. Again, it's that selective incentives, the incentives to drive, and what are the incentives of these big companies, obviously to make money. Now there's money in it, and that's where they're driving it. It's never about the money. It's always about the money sometimes, right? And the more they tell you it's not about the money, the more it is about the money. War and innovation, you know, with the Ukraine war, and I'm proud to be part Polish. My mother was Polish from Krakow. And I'm going to Poland to do some volunteer work there. Wars are what really accelerates some of the innovation in medicine. It goes back to the Civil War. Actually, plastic surgery started after World War I because of the hand and face trauma during that war. The face transplant was supported by the Department of Defense, our first 6 face transplants. So war tends to drive innovation. And the other thing about, if you look at innovation, and I studied innovation for years at Case Western Reserve, innovation is driven sort of from the offsprings that come from the government, because the government has the bandwidth and the money, a lot of it, and they have the time to waste that money sometimes to really push gradually innovation, such as the internet, such as GPS, such as lithium batteries. So you can trace any big center of innovation in the United States, Silicon Valley, Boston, Minneapolis, and you can trace it to individuals even. And those individuals you can trace back to Washington, D.C. So another great book is Blue Ocean. And this is a great management book. And what Blue Ocean taught me is that don't worry about the competition. Competition is actually good. If you're a John Stuart Mills type of guy and with you know, economics and macroeconomics, you realize that competition is what you want. But how do we compete with competition when it's head to head? Well, you actually make them irrelevant. And that's what innovation is about. Innovating new ways of looking and clarifying the problem. So you come up with new ways and then actually make your competition irrelevant. So what are the things that we can look at? We know what some of the problems are. Well, we can adapt innovation. And here's an example of a chart of looking at the global scientific output doubles every 9 years. Well, actually, that's probably, and that was back in 2010 or 11. It's more quicker than that. And look at the amount of innovation growth in technology. So all you got to do is look around you and see what is very adaptive. But then you got to see what the hype is. And some of the hype has been going on for a long period of time. So what's real and not real? And there's a great article in Harvard Business Review called Lying to Liars, where entrepreneurs will lie to venture capitalists and venture capitalists will lie to entrepreneurs for the deal, because it's never about the money, always about the money. So you got to figure out what's hype and not hype. And here's another thing. When you invent, or if you come up with an idea, or you come up with and clarify the problem, look around you first. And this was an idea that was given to me by Dean Kamen. Don't invent a north-pointing chariot, he used to say. Frank, don't invent a north-pointing. And I go, what does that mean? He said, well, back in the days of Genghis Khan, they used to have battles, and the battles were 100 miles this way or 100 miles this way. And the great Chinese engineers at that time invented this north-pointing chariot, which was a complex of gears that once you had this, you know, artificial or statue of a soldier pointing where the battle is, if one of the chariot horses would pull the chariot this way, the gears would keep that pointing, saying, oh no, the battle's there. Because if you were off 20, 30 miles, the enemy would come around you and ambush you. So I said, look around you. Well, at that time, that's where the lodestone was found in China, where if you simply took a lodestone, which was a ferrite, and put it in a glass of water, it became a compass. So instead of this complex thing that was invented, all they had to do is take a bowl of water and put the stone and say, okay, that's north, so the battle's over here. So look around you first about the new technologies, about other things that you can read and learn about that have nothing to do with medicine. And that's what I do now. Most of my readings is outside of plastic surgery and surgery. It's mostly in technology. And here's a prime example in my field. Eliza Roth was a Russian orthopedic surgeon who many years ago invented this thing about stretching bone out after you fracture it, and then over a period of time, like taffy, it would stretch and then heal during its stretching healing phase. Well, Joe McCarthy, who was the chairman at NYU, just took what Eliza Roth had and applied it to the craniofacial skeleton. So these kids that were born with severe craniofacial abnormalities, he could mold their face over a period of time, making osteotomies, bone cuts, and then using a Eliza Roth-like technique to do that. We use that today. So what am I doing? So I'm looking at virtual and augmented reality. That's one of the big things, because I think that's going to change the face already, how we plan surgery. It's going to change the way about how we do surgery. And this is our last face transplant. And this is how we planned it in virtual reality. So I could actually walk through the model and say, well, here's this blood vessel, we're going to use this blood vessel, can't use this because this has been destroyed here. And so I think that's the future. So how can you adapt as surgeons, as medical students, and use augmented reality? I think it's here to stay. The other one that we're looking at is fluorescent-guided surgery. And this is going to be the hot big thing. These are the gold miners in surgery. They're the ones that have focus receptors on different tumor or tissue types, normal tissue types like nerves, sensory nerves, whatever, that they can tag and light up with different colors. So just like when I was a kid, I used to paint by color, paint by numbers with different colors. In the future, surgeons are going to do surgery by color to stay away from this, this part of this nerve, and this is where the tumor is, make sure I got the tumor all out. If I don't see color or I don't see radiation or whatever, that is really the gold miners. They're finding ways to attack that. And there's literally 60 programs going on right now that are going through FDA protocol. So again, clarifying the problem, bringing in other technology together. So this is one of the things that we're doing, is we're doing this with ways to combine multimodal therapy to image this. This is one of the sort of rabbit experiments that we did, and how this can propagate and show tumor flow, in this case, into the axilla of that. So we've developed, again, with some people here in Akron, University of Akron, and actually that young gentleman there really helped us many years ago to do this. So we've been in the process of this. Now we have prototypes, and we're doing national studies of this, of taking this new type of surgical goggle to the gold miners, where we can advance and see the tumor with fluorescent-guided surgery, magnify it from 1x to 10x. So we get rid of the operating microscope. We get rid of all these $500,000 worth of things. And they could simply wear this device, which is like a surgical loop, but it's an advanced surgical loop. So I think surgical navigation in the future is going to be like a fighter pilot. You're going to wear this gown, and they're going to use intraoperative molecular imaging, and you're going to see what to cut and what not to cut, as simple as that. We're going to be like, what my kids love is Iron Man, We're going to have this technology around us so we can walk through things, walk through the plan. And then as we're going through surgery, see through your body even before we start operating on you. Know where that tumor is, know where those vessels or arteries or nerves are that we want to stay away from. And then through you, we can start the surgery and carefully dissect through that. I'm very excited about that. The next big thing is learnable robots, because just like you see as a human robot and know and calculate what to cut, what not to cut, the learnable robots will do the same thing. And they'll need surgical guidance. They'll need color, except their spectrum of what they see and in the light spectrum is like this, where for us humans is like this. So they'll be far more better than they are about, with spectroscopy, developing what to cut and what not to cut. This is one of our experiments. This was a cadaver that this person passed, and we were able to keep this human limb alive for 3 days, 72 hours. So what? Well, the key thing is not to be like Frankenstein, but the key thing is that this opens up the amount of potential donors to liver, kidney, heart, lung, and composite tissue allografts like face transplant, hand transplants. So used to be, and still is now, that we can only operate in an area of about 30, 40 miles for donor capability. This opens up to the world, basically 3 days of travel, right? The other thing that I've learned is failure, never to fear failure. And I tell that to my vice chairs and my residents and my young staff. If you clarify and you do it right and you're transparent and authentic and honest, just move ahead. Keep on moving, press on, press on. So it's more than a 4-letter F word, but it's still as powerful as that 4-letter F word. We have to be a bit defiant and just press on. And there's a lot of failures. I mean, these are just prime examples of Walt Disney and Oprah and everything like that. But if you don't fail, you're not trying hard enough. And as surgeons, we know when we're in pediatric general surgery, they say if 100% of the appendixes that you take out are infected, you're not taking out enough because you're missing some. And I would say the same thing with ideas and inventions and things like that. So here's the challenge. I leave you with this. We're all going to be gone pretty soon. Okay, we're here for a short period of time. And in that short period of time, you know, what's the lion that you're going to kill, like an African tribe, to be whoever, to really be something in that tribe? You've got to do something. So my challenge to everybody in this room is, what lion are you going to kill? What impact, and through that impact, what legacy will you develop? It's great. I mean, if you think about it, we're in the most honorable profession. We're relieving pain and suffering. To me, there's not much more honorable profession than that. But you can expand that even more by expanding the legacy and the impact that you have, not just on one patient and another patient, which is great, and developing those individual relationships, but in a much broader approach. So as again, Steve Jobs says, you know, we're all going to be gone. So there's no reason not to follow your heart, that childlike joy of doing something. So thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Monica Robbins from WKYC, the senior medical correspondent, for any questions. Thank you. It's been an honor. Okay.
Hello to our live audience and our virtual audience. Need to make sure the microphone's on here. So for our live audience, what I'd like to tell you is, if you have any questions for Dr. Papay, please make your way over to the aisle where you see these round tables. There are microphones on top of those tables. All you have to do is hit the button. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to pick it up. So if you have any questions there, and also welcome to our virtual audience. They are watching via Zoom. And if you all have questions as well, please put them in the Q&A section, and I will be more than happy to ask these questions of Dr. Papay. So we don't have any yet, so I'm going to start with you, because you and I have talked a lot about face transplants and a number of other issues, but why do you invent?
You know, again, I think that's the last thing I said. You know, I had, unfortunately, when I was 16, I had a brother. Actually, I was 13. He was 16. I had a brother who passed away. He drowned. And when he was 16 and I was 13, we lived in we had the bedroom. We shared our bed together. He was on one side of the room and I was on the other. And I thought to myself, boy, you know, just by serendipity, that, you know, we're here, but you know, we could be gone tomorrow. And so because of that, I said, you know, what am I going to do in my life? And I still say that every day. And I tell my kids that, you know, and again, what's this? We can't build pyramids, right? All right. That was long ago, and you need a lot of money to build a pyramid, but you can build sort of a legacy with a genetic legacy with your kids and who you teach, an educational legacy, but you can also build other legacies. And one of mine, I think, is leaving an impact through things that will hopefully help pain and suffering.
One of the other things I was very interested in you mentioning, were you a Boy Scout in addition to everything else you did?
I was a Cub Scout. My parents couldn't afford to send me too much for it. Yeah, I was the middle. This is what's wrong with me. I'm the middle child of 6 kids, and my mother was the baby of 9 children. So we had a huge extended family. And yeah, so I was a Cub Scout. I was, you know, I kind of followed the rules pretty quite carefully. So, but
always be prepared.
Always be
is
prepared.
Your philosophy.
That's right.
You talk about how do you do that when you're always preparing for the what ifs, but in a surgery that no one has ever done before?
You know, that's a great, again, getting back to NASA, you know, Gene Cerner used to say, you know, what if you failed, and what are you going to do next? And so my mantra is act from failure. Don't fear failure, but act from failure. So expect to fail. But if you fail, then what's next? What are you going to do? So in the face transplant, the first face transplant was exactly that, you know, okay, let's say this fails, then what are you going to do next? And just like NASA, you know, you had a backup, then you had a backup to the backup, then you had a backup to the backup to the backup. So one of my favorite movies that I've seen multiple times is Apollo 13, because again, it was this quick ingenuity and the fact that they got in trouble without the backups, or despite the backups, that you get these black swan effects that can happen. So you got to be prepared at any time. So the more kind of, you know, little tricks you have in your bag, like Felix the cat, the better you are to sort of approach that problem.
And study your math, because that's what
study your math, right?
So we have a question from online. This is from Joe. What additional degrees or certifications do you suggest for medical students?
Oh, that's another good one. I think, again, you could you don't need it. All a degree does is legitimatizes you, if you really think about it. You know, I'm legitimatized because I have an MD degree to do medicine. I'm legitimatized because I have an MBA or doctorate, this or that. So it gives you the honor to have it and the licensure to do something, but do you need something to invent? No. That being said, I think in the reverse mentorship approach to what I do, I think the future of medicine and the things that you should have or think about learning is obviously machine learning, by far number one. And you don't need to learn to be a coder. You don't need to code. You just need to know the strategy of how the algorithm will occur. And you can do it in a box or a flow chart. You don't even have to know the math to that, or you don't have to know Laplace transform, Fourier analysis. All you need to know is the flow of that. Okay. And then from that, you can find somebody who can make that into a mathematical equation. And from the math, you can have somebody else who would do the coding. So it's just understanding, you know, the tools that you have again. And to me, one of the big ones is machine learning, and study something that if you're a surgeon, study cellular biology. If you're a cellular biology, study electronics. Go to something else, another industry, totally on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm studying spectroscopy. You know, so, you know, the world is amazing at the amount of technology that's out there, amazing at the amount of discoveries that are out there. How can we adapt to that? And so, in my opinion, I'm learning now machine learning. So, and here's a little pitch, is that we do have a website. It's free for everybody. It's across the world. It started with two guys. Piyush Mathur was an intensivist and I. We have 4,000 members worldwide, and it's machine learning for all. And so you can go to there and kind of look and see, and we collate all the machine learning new articles that come out each year, and we collate it to the subspecialty, medicine, surgery, radiology, or whatever. So go there, and from there, if you are interested, you can go and find out where are courses for free to learn how to do some of this.
We have a question from our live audience. Hit the button again.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Parks. I'm a first-year medical student, and I wanted to start by thanking you for your time today to come and speak with us. I do know for a lot of people, there's a love-hate relationship with technology. And so I was wondering if you have any concerns with augmented reality, with surgeries, and people becoming reliant on that to a point that it might interfere with them being able to do a surgery without that assistance if they needed to.
Well, that's a very good question, you know, and it's more applied towards robotics than I think with augmented reality. So robots will be able to do, they do now, orthopedics got robots to do surgery and things like that. You got to see, again, is it faster, better, and cheaper, number one. Number two, again, as the legitimate actor, you still are accountable for that surgery. So if the robot screws up, you're still the one who's accountable for it, medical legally. So, you know, I don't think it's going to replace doctors. I think it's going to be helping physicians and surgeons. I think getting back to machine learning, you know, I think machine learning is going to augment what we do. It's going to augment the patient access. It's going to augment our quality of differential diagnoses and what's the right differential diagnosis to really submit. I think it's just going to augment what we do. But you as a surgeon, as a physician, as an internist, you still are the accountable agent. So you're not going away. As a matter of fact, there's not enough of you. And as time goes on, there'll be less of you. We need more of you.
This is from Michael. When do you think practicing surgery virtually will be the new norm for surgical residents and attendants?
It's kind of now. I think there's a lot of simulation, you know, for surgery where you can simulate. But I disagree getting back to virtual reality and augmented reality. And I think you guys have here one of the best cadaver labs in a medical school. You still need to feel and touch and do. You know, there's an old Chinese proverb, you know, tell somebody something, they'll forget it in a few minutes. Show them and tell them, they'll know it, but you have to experience it to really understand and learn it forever. So I still am a big advocate of cadaver labs and practicing.
Question from our live audience. Just make sure hit it again. Make sure it's green. That's all. There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yep.
Good. My name is Andrew Newsom. I'm a first-year medical student here. I just wanted to, so you said that life is serendipitous multiple times throughout your speech. Do you believe that the next step in improvement, personal or team-wise, is less a motivational one and more of a logical step?
Say that again one more time.
Like in improvement, do you believe that for the next step, it is more of a motivational issue, or do you believe it's more of a logical step?
You mean a personal motivation?
Personal or team?
Yeah, I think it's, well, again, I think you got to find the right personality. You can't change leopards on the spot, you know, and so it's how do you motivate people? How do you engage people? I'm still learning that. But what you try to do is do something bigger than each of the individuals that are in the team, and get them excited about it again. But if they're not excited about it, if they're not joyous about it, if not, and have their selective incentives about it, then, you know, they shouldn't be a part of the team. And a prime example could be like the face transplant, where some did it for ego, some did it for fame, some did it, you know, for academic ego or whatever like that. But it was the ones that did it just to do it, that were just excited about doing something that hasn't been done before. Those are the ones that I selected. Was that, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, that answered my question. Thank you.
How do you deal with the egos?
Yeah, that's another good one. And I don't know if anybody here knows Coach K. He just retired. He was the famous basketball coach at Duke. And Coach K used to teach the Olympic basketball team. So you had LeBron James and all these other incredible egos. And and what I asked him, and we were at lunch together in this leadership conference, I go, Coach K, how did you do it? You got these, you know, super players in the world. He said, you let them coach themselves. You come up with a constitution of rules, and they come up with it. And then if somebody isn't on practice on time or somebody's goofing off, they will coach them, and they will be the ones that will give them the, you know, hey, get in line or get in order. So it's really coming up with this agreement and this constitution, as he put it, to let them govern themselves. So that's how you govern big egos. Not that surgeons don't have big egos, right?
Victor wants to know, innovation is important. However, we would like to hear your thoughts on how to stimulate innovation with little to no resources.
Well, again, Dean Kamen was probably the best inventor. He's our Thomas Alva Edison of our era. Never graduated from college. Okay, did most of the stuff in his basement. And with Google and the internet and all these free sources like brainx.ai, okay, this thing I was telling you about, you don't need, you know, to go to Stanford or go to Carnegie Mellon or you need to develop the relationships. The key to me, the serendipity of bumping into people and having people that are kind of like you and developing those relationships, that's the secret sauce. It's not the intellect, trust me. I mean, I'm a prime example. It's not the intellect, it's the social intelligence. So make as many friends as you can, good friends, friends that support you, friends that are like you, friends that want to encourage you, and vice versa. Don't get somebody that puts you down or said, oh, that'll never work. You know, we would never do the face transplant. The former chair of our department said, oh, you know, we don't have enough capacity or the right people. And as soon as I flipped it, no, we move ahead. So encouragement, engagement, the joy of doing something bigger than you, and picking the right people are really the key to that.
Hi, my name is Bethany Bear. I'm a first-year medical student. I've noticed one of the characteristics common among some transformational leaders that we've met, yourself, those that you've mentioned, is humility. How do you balance maintaining humility with the confidence you need to take some of the leaps that you've taken?
Yeah, you know, I mean, humility is something that, you know, I think some of it's innate. It's kind of, you know, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I mean, being a middle child of 6 kids, that'll make you humble. You know, coming from a big family, that'll make you humble. Being here with people much brighter than you, that'll make you humble. I mean, ego is a terrible thing sometimes. It's important. Self-esteem and ego is important. But when you cross that step, then it's actually, you know, it actually hurts you more than anything else. Because, you know, we've done some experiments where the team approach to a solution is always gives you the best answer. So if you think you're smarter than the next guy, there's always somebody smarter than you. If you think you've got the right solution, no, you don't, you know. It's a dynamic approach. So I have learned, and I have learned by watching people die in front of me. I have learned by my brother dying. I've learned by watching people that are very successful fall from grace. That you have to be authentic, you have to be honest, you have to be transparent in every aspect of your life. Because if not, somewhere down the road, it will catch up with you. You know, that's part of the humility, is just watching the people around you as good examples and bad examples, and knowing that you could be there at any time. So life to me is a bunch of decision makings, okay? Just like a robot almost, you know. Decision making is super important. And whether you brush your teeth or comb your hair or decide to go in medicine or decide to go in engineering, those things reflect you to the day you die. Who you marry, who your partner is. It's all about good decision making, and good decision making in a team, and reflecting that you're not fooling yourself and being prejudiced within yourself is important. That's why I think groupthink can be dangerous, but it also can be very good. So, you know, who that boardroom around you is, family, friends, colleagues, is the most important thing in your life, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Repeated failure helps too with humility, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Rod wants to know, you often refer to the impact that anatomy had on your career as a surgeon. What was so special about that course?
You know, we had a great anatomy lab here and a great neuroanatomy lab here. Actually, I think, and it's still to this day, when we do face transplants, or, you know, we have a couple spin-offs of doing neuromodulation for sleep apnea, neuromodulation for chronic migraine headaches. I still to this day, almost, if not weekly, at least monthly, you know, I will go to the cadaver lab, because no matter what you do in life, and you learn the complexity of the molecular receptor, and, you know, it still comes down to knowing it from a basic anatomy level, and then breaking it down. And as a surgeon, no matter what idea you come up with, you still have to have some type of drug delivery system or some type of surgical approach to get to that neuromodulation device there, or that drug delivery device here. So that's where is the plateau, the platform that you start from. And I still, to this day, after 30 some years, I still go back to the anatomy lab all the time. It's the essence of medicine, and understanding how one reflects the other, and all the different things that beget from it, the physiology and the biochemistry and whatever.
This is from an anonymous online viewer. Can a person live without a face?
Well, a face, the question that we had back in the day ethically is the face an organ. And if you think about the face, and you think about the rest of our body, our heart, our liver, our kidney, our intestines, our legs, everything we do from the face on down supports what? Supports the brain, right? So if you, God forbid, are demented and have Alzheimer's, and I've seen this happening with my mother, and you see their personality gradually go away. You know, it's their brain gradually going away. They become a shell, right? And that unfortunately happens. But that shell, when it's alive, it's most of its sensory inputs and expression is through the face. Taste, speech, which is the most complex thing any animal on earth does. Hearing, you know, smell, flavor, and go on and on and on. It's the face that is the transit, it's the conduit to the brain, more than anything else. So the rest of us is just to support the brain. But the face is what gives us the social interaction, the self-esteem, the expression, the communication that we as complex beings really make us complex beings, really make us the difference.
This one is from a friend of yours, Dwayne Taylor, from your NEOMED days.
Dwayne, yeah.
He wants you to talk about the engaging in new innovation techniques and technology on the ground floor as an inventor and protecting the intellectual property.
Yeah, well, at the Cleveland Clinic, when you come up with an invention, depending on what it is, if it deals with any type of healthcare, they own it lock, stock, and barrel. Okay, and what they do is they give you incentive, because it's never about the money, it's always about the money. They give you incentive to do it. And their incentive is you own about 40, used to be you own 50%, now you own 40-some% if you're the sole inventor. If it's multiple inventors, you divide that up. And then from there, they will go ahead and spend the money to develop the intellectual property, to patent it, and you get small grants to do that. but they are really the owners. Now, that being said, the problem, and I have a whole hour lecture on this, the problem with large organizations owning intellectual property is they don't understand the value of it like you do. The inventor and the end user, the physician, the surgeon knows the value of that. A manager doesn't know the value of it. And so it's that, again, getting back to the secret sauce of entrepreneurship, which I also studied, is convincing people to give you money you show them the value of this and they give you money to develop it, right? That's what Steve Jobs is famous for. He didn't invent anything, really. He didn't invent the iPhone, Bill Gates didn't invent much at all. But they had this knack, the secret sauce of able to convincing people to give them money to develop something. And they collated and collected all these other intellectual properties to develop Microsoft and Apple and whatever. And still to this day, that's kind of how those large organizations do it. So, I think these organizations should release more of the intellectual property back to the inventor and let the inventor help develop it, let the inventor help sell it with that secret sauce, because they know the value better than anybody. Dwayne, I hope that answered your question.
Michael wants to know, wonderful presentation and advice. If it becomes more accessible, safer, and cheaper, would you travel to space and complete your childhood dream?
I would in a heartbeat.
So you put your name in on that list, right?
I don't have enough money to do it quite. Was it $250,000 or something like that? But I would.
Rob wants to talk more about the serendipity of the relationships you've developed over your professional career. What does that look like? Is it being in the right elevator at the right time, or being lucky enough to be placed on a team with someone like you?
I think it's a bit of serendipity is not luck. It's just, you're bumping into people. I'm bumping into you right now. Okay. How am I impacting you? How am I influencing you at all? Or are you just having lunch here? Okay. So how do I influence you in this short period of time? And you do that every time you see a patient. In the 15, 20 minutes, hour that you see a patient, you're influencing, you're developing a relationship in that short period of time. You don't know who that person is. And so how do you develop, like Forrest Gump, in a short period of time on the park bench, develop this relationship? Well, it's something that I'm still learning, but I don't think it's luck. I think it's something that it's something that you learn from your parents. It's something that you learn from your friends. You went to college, you had your best buds in college, and when I still see my best buds in college, I degrade down to that level immediately, right? Because that's how I relate to them, okay? But when I'm teaching somebody that has an MD, PhD, and has got 600 papers, I relate to them differently. So I think the relationships are like a chameleon, like a lizard. You change your colors based on your environment. And I think the secret sauce to that is knowing when your environment changes, okay? Does that make sense?
What are some of the systemic barriers to medical innovation?
Systemic barriers? Well, again, I think the best advisors in my life were called advisors. The worst advisors in my life were called advisors. And I would say managers that manage things that don't have this, getting back to Eleanor Ostrom, the Nobel Prize winner, about the collective action. If they don't have a selective incentive in the same line that you are to come up with something new, to develop this business, to help your education, to make you become the physician or surgeon that you want, like your parents are, then to me, you just have to understand that. She was one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and I use it on. I don't use it. I learn from it from my kids, from work, from the relationships I develop. Is developing something where you can align incentives. The key is aligning incentives, and so in a systemic view, if your institution, if your advisors, if your managers aren't aligned with what you want to do, how do you either realign your alignment or they realign their alignment? And it happens every day at work and in life.
What are you working on now that's the next greatest innovation?
Everything. I would say, I think the next big thing is surgical guidance. I think you're going to see very soon that surgeons are going to wear these, what we call digital loops, They're going to magnify from 1x to 10x, and they're going to have fluorescent guided surgery. The next thing is you're going to see digital twinning, where they're going to have, you know, you're going to be represented physically and you're going to be represented digitally. And how we create the future digital twin of Monica Robbins, and how Monica Robbins in real life can meet the same aspects of genetics and physiology is a big thing. There's so many big things. That's the great thing about technology and all this sort of explosion of data. There's too much. There's too much of it. You get this sort of tsunami of data falling on you. So you just have to be careful and pick and choose. But I mean, I could talk forever on that. There's a lot of things that will be the next big thing. And it's happening quicker than it's ever happened before.
Hello, my name is Amanda Milo. I'm a first-year medical student. And you spoke about failure quite a bit in your talk. Can you provide an example of a time that you and your team have experienced a very hard failure, and how you and your team were able to pivot, and how you kept the morale and encouragement to move forward from that failure?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're working on now is a sleep apnea device for neuromodulation of the part of the branches of the hypoglossal nerve. And we tried it on dogs, we tried it on this or that, and it just didn't work, just didn't work. And it wasn't until, you know, again, we changed the way the frequency, the aha, that was the moment that it worked. I mean, every single one of these things had, you know, dozens and dozens of failures. I mean, getting back to the surgical loops, you know, the fluorescent guided surgery, you know, we just have our first working prototype now that was successful. The other ones just, you know, the circuitry just burnt up. The ion thrusters, which are being now used for interstellar space. The reason I got involved with NASA was because of Earth applications, because the thing failed. So the government, in their smart way, said, we can't let the, you know, the nation know that this failed. We got to think of an Earth application for it. So my job was to come up with ion thrusters and figure out how we can, you know, ion beam sputter stuff and do this and combine what's called cold welding, different elements together with that. So failure happens all the time. I mean, every single one of the things that we do have dozen of failure. The key is resilience and keeping the group together through the joy of saying, that's okay, we expect that. So we expect failure. So how do you work from there?
You mentioned that medical and medicine, innovation and medicine need to be cheaper, faster, and more beneficial. We can do the latter two. How do we make it cheaper?
Well, you got to do, if you do things faster, they end up being cheaper. If you do things in sort of mass and drive it more towards the home. So instead of medical care being in the hospital, you do it to the urgent care center. From the urgent care center, you drive it home. So the more we drive preventative healthcare and healthcare at home, the cheaper it's going to get.
We have one more question.
Okay.
Hello, my name's Nathan Abdelnour, and I'm one student. What's one piece of advice that you wish you knew when you were in my shoes?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. The best advice that I would have for you at that time is, again, getting back to the digital twin. Think of yourself as a future self. Think of yourself not now and all the arduous work that you have to do for biochemistry and anatomy and everything like that. But think of yourself as a future self 10 years from now, or segment it into 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And then, you know, like a long race, you know, you're not going to sprint it, but how are you going to get there? And then who are the people that you're going to develop your boardroom with to get you there?
Thank you to all of our questioners online and in person. Any final thoughts, Dr. Papay?
No, I mean, I'm honored to be here. It's great to be back here. And, you know, I hope you found this engaging, and I hope you create something bigger and better than I ever will, and go kill your lion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Papay, for that inspirational talk, and Monica for your expert moderation. Please join us next time for Vitals on October 6th. Until then, find your passion, stay engaged, and lead, because you are the driver of change.
Health outcomes, changes due to interventions. To bring positive change, patient experiences and health must both improve. Healthcare costs must be lowered, and clinician and staff burnout has to end. But our problems are big. 133 million Americans have at least one chronic disease. 500,000 people are dying every year from hospital errors, injuries, and infection. The shortage of primary care professionals will be as much as 100,000 in just the next 5 years. Big problems require bigger solutions. Positive change needs acceleration. It needs to happen now. But these are not so easy solutions that many don't want to hear, and even few are willing to talk about. How to lead such a change? How to discover, discuss, and disrupt healthcare to make a difference now? This is VITALS, Visionary Health Leadership in Action.